A very good afternoon, distinguished delegates, Mr. Winston A de Rosario, Director Global Head of People and Culture at SJIM, Ms. Ritu Chaubey, Human Resource Director, Comscore, Mr. Mathew Joseph, Associate Director, Human Resource at Biocon Biologics, Mr. Dileep Chandra, Talent Acquisition Head at HP, our Director, Reverend Dr. Mathew Joseph, SJ, Dean Dr. A.R. Rajgopalan, Professor B.J. Lawrence, faculty members, staff, and my dear students. On behalf of the Director and the HR Club of St. Joseph Institute of Management, we are grateful for the time you have taken to be with us here at our annual HR Roundtable Conference. I would also like to thank Ms. Roly Singh, Head of Human Resources at BA5 SLK, who also enthusiastically wish to be present with us in this today's roundtable. Unfortunately, she tested COVID positive today and responsibly excused herself. We wish her a speedy recovery.
I now invite our panelists and our director, Reverend Dr. Mathew Joseph, SJ, to please come forward and light the lamp. Reverend Dr. Mathew Joseph, SJ, to give away a welcome token to our delegates for the day. Mr. Winston A de Rosario, Director, Global Head of People and Culture at SJIM. Mr. Dileep Chandra, Talent Acquisition Head at HP India. Ms. Ritu Chaubey, Human Resource Director at Comscore. Mr. Mathew Joseph, Associate Director, Human Resource at Biocon Biologics. Thank you, Father, and I now request you to kindly deliver the welcome address.
Our esteemed panelists for this HR conclave on the days, my dear faculty members, the students, the organizers especially. At the outset, I'm very happy to welcome all of you, and especially our esteemed panelists. I think they are more than panelists, they are well-wishers of SJIM. Some have been our own alumnus, one of them, and others are also they have visited our campus earlier, and they are very happy to be part of this conclave. So, very heartfelt welcome to each of you, and we are indeed blessed by your presence and availability. And the names are already mentioned: Winston Rosario, the Director of Global Head of People and Culture of SJIM, and Chaubey, Director of Human Resource Conclave, Mathew Joseph, Associate Director, Human Resources, Biologics, and Dileep Chandra, Head of Talent Acquisition, HP, India. I think our HR club has chosen two critical issues which are shaping the future of human resource management, and the club rolled into one team today, and they are Agile Succession Planning and Diversity on Bench. No need to say these are the very critical, important issues governing or happening in the human resources today. What is Agile Succession Planning? It is very simple. It is to find the right people at right time and right place. Three things: finding right people at right time and right place. So many methods are there, but there is no one method as such. Who is the right person? I think so far nobody has succeeded in the world to find the real who is the right person. Every one of us, we are good in something, right? We need to improve, but always we must find the right strategies to identify the right kind of people for our organizations, so that we stay ahead of the curve, and we are also resilient to the changes that are taking place in our business landscape today. I think in that way, the theme is very relevant, especially for the students who are studying here, and many of you are from HR specialization. I think the discussion what we are going to have is really going to be beneficial to you. And secondly, inclusion and diversion. It is not only a moral obligation, but a business imperative. Remember that it's not only moral obligation. We need to have inclusivity and diversity in every time, every place. School, colleges, workplace, we need inclusion and diversity. And we should not be afraid of it. That is the need of the hour. We need to welcome and cherish our diversity. I think that's SJIM stands for that. We have the diversity of all students from all over India, from different cultures, different religions. I think we are one of the business schools who hold the value of diversity so much in great esteem. I think it was all the more required in the human resources today, so that the studies have also shown that the companies which have diversity, they are doing better, they are very innovative, creative, and they are more successful. I think our people who are here, and they are more experienced, they have in the companies, they have worked in the human resources. I think their perspectives and their discussions will definitely help us and encourage and motivate us. So once again, a hearty welcome to all of you, the dignitaries of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father. We at SJIM recognize that for excellence in business education, St. Joseph's cannot just be a passive transmitter of knowledge, but a creator, consolidator, and disseminator of business knowledge. This year's HR Roundtable is a step in this later direction. The Roundtable will draw on the extensive expertise of our distinguished panel to further our understanding of developing agile succession planning processes and diversifying the leadership bench for the future. Today's roundtable attempts to facilitate an interface between industry and academia. I am Megha Kansagra, Student Chairwoman of HR Club Committee, along with the fellow student members Priscilla Boniface, Swada, Priyal Nagar, and Navya Shri.
We will now introduce each of our distinguished faculty members and call upon them to give their insights in their specific domains of operation and expertise.
We will first start off with Mr. Winston A de Rosario. He is an MBA from the University of Brussels and has completed an executive program at IIM Bangalore. In his role as Global Head of People and Culture at SILK, he helps C-suite leaders and the board drive new age people, culture and community practices which enable businesses. Over the last 5 years, Mr. Winston has helped build and transform early stage startups. As a core team member, he has helped founders scale their people function, besides playing a key role in raising over $20 million seed and Series A funding round across 3 startups. his list, Mr. Winston worked in key roles at organizations such as Accenture, Ernst & Young, and Grant Thornton. Mr. Winston is a curious learner, culture transformer, and a guitarist in his free time. So, Mr. Winston, what are the main challenges that you foresee for succession planning?
So good afternoon, everyone. Little louder. Good afternoon. So we're all awake. So I like to tell stories, or I like to show instances where if HR gets things right, you can really make an impact. So prior to my journey in startups, I used to work in very large organizations. Generally, when you work in large organizations, you have large teams. And then I decided, like most of y'all, I wanted to actually be in fast-paced early startups. Question to the group: how many of you all want to be entrepreneurs or join startups? Could you raise your hands? Okay, interesting. Thank you. In startup, succession planning is very, very different. We are not large. So let me give you Silk's example. We are about 70 people, but we are spread across China. We are spread across India. In India, we have people in Chennai, Bangalore, Pune, Tirupur. We used to have people working in Pakistan and Bangladesh as well. They occasionally work for us. They dial up or sometimes they dial down. We have people in Europe, sometimes again working for us. And then we have people in US, spread across different time zones, and in Canada. When I joined Silk, there was no HR department. Very young set of people, technologists changing the way freight, you see these big containers. Containers connect the world, but most of you might not realize it. 33% of every container goes empty. So there are a lot of people that pay for air to send it across the world, and ships also pollute. So these set of engineers decided to change the world, and they had an aha moment where they wanted me to be HR. Now, the first biggest risk we had till recently was that I was the only person in HR. Very strange, right? How can you have a very large team when you have only 70 powerful people? So succession planning is all about getting leaders to understand the need for better, smarter people, or people who will step up when you can't step up. As a result, I hired somebody that has worked with me, graduated from MIT, I think a year ago. She joined me in January. So the biggest challenge for succession planning, I think Father, you said it really well. You have to look for the right people. Timing is not going to be easy. So I engaged with her for about 9 months before I hired her. We used to meet at Pasta Street. We talk about HR trends. I talk about what's going on in the world. So the right time has to come. But your point, which is last, is very important. It's also when you come together, then succession planning is all about how you get the organization to understand what its design is. I call it organization design. Traditionally, people used to call it OD. I like to call it organization design. Once you know the design of the organization, it's important to inspire performance. All of us wake up in the morning and we want to be good at things, right? How do we inspire performance? How do we celebrate milestones? To be able to build an organization that will go forward no matter what. One term I'd like you to go back and do some research on. It's a very interesting term. I learned it when I joined startups. It's called bus factor. Anybody here in the room has heard of bus factor? Bus factor is, before Nikita joined, if I got hit by a bus, yes, it's a very visual term, right? If anything happened to me, basically the organization was going to be in trouble because only one person in HR. So succession planning is bringing the right people, empowering them, and moving away from bus factor one to grow the organization successfully. This has been my experience, especially in startups over the last 10 years.
Thank you, Mr. Winston, for addressing the question with such expertise. Going forward, it is my privilege to introduce to the gathering Mr. Dileep Chandra. Mr. Chandra has been operating as the head of talent acquisition for India at HC Incorporated, wherein he manages lateral, campus, and staffing functions for all the business verticals in the country, namely sales, R&D, IT, supply chain, finance, customer support, sales operations, and global functions. His journey with HP has been quite a ride, spanning over more than 20 years, and it has allowed him to gain an abundance of knowledge, skills, and expertise through the roles he has taken up in the human resource domain, such as that of Global Service Manager, Operations Manager, Country Manager, all the way to his current role as India Talent Acquisition Head. So, my question to you is, what are the main challenges in the Indian context in creating agility in succession planning?
Thank you. So, you mentioned Indian context, right? So, I have a question before I start to all you guys. What do you think is Indian context? Is it different to a US context? Is it different to Europe? How many think that Indian context is same as Europe context or US context? It is different. If you ask a US guy how to say yes, he would nod his head, yes. You ask a Europe guy how to say no, he will nod his head, no. You ask an Indian, what do you get? You get a wobble, right? Yes, yes. No, it's no. So Indian context is very different, right? So coming to the challenges in the Indian context, take my example. I've been in this role I've been in HP for almost 80 plus years now, right? And I've done various roles. I've been in talent acquisition now for the last 3 years. I intend to continue for another 3-4 years maybe in the same role, right? Imagine a successor is identified for me. What will be his first reaction? Ayyo, when will this guy leave? That's what context. May not be India specific, but in India you will find a lot of people who stay in an organization for a very long time. I had identified a successor for myself in my own team. I was just planning. I look back, he's gone. They left HP. That's another context, right? Again, very human in nature. It's human dynamics here, right? And as part of your succession planning, you have a decision to make whether you need to be very transparent or you need to be very confidential about it. So if you are transparent, everyone gets to know that he is the successor or she is the successor, right? What happens? My peers will feel sad about it. Couple of them will stop talking to him or upset. So as a leader, I start fearing about the negative environment that might get created. I think of those guys who are loyal in the organization, who need to be promoted and stuff, right? And at the same time, if I have a successor identified, that successor over a few months might start acting like a boss, maybe my boss, right? These are human dynamics. Things change when they are earmarked to be something. One of the challenges, and very much found in Indian context, there's bias, another big challenge. Conscious one and the unconscious one. The temptation to go with the stereotype of plug and play. Oh, this is my guy who knows stuff, or someone who knows stuff already. My job will be easy, let me hire him or her. That's a stereotype, right? That derails the whole logical approach that you want to proceed with the good succession planning. Many leaders prefer that, right? So these are Indian context, is more relevant to a culture or a human dynamics point of view. But if you are talking about other technological point of view, there are a lot of technology related challenges. The tools that we use, the products that we have, which will help us have a robust succession planning. You can't have everything in Excel sheet, right? You need to have a tool. You need to pay and buy some tools. Of course, big companies can afford. Smaller companies might still manually manage it. That delays the whole processing, right? So technology tools play a big role as well. That's another challenge we face, right? There's less transparency There's actually no good tool right now to have a good robust succession plan that can manage a big number of people. Right? That's a challenge. No proper development plan. The whole cycle, if it has to start, I'm talking about process now, if the whole cycle has to start, the person identified as successor should get a job to move up. So the important part is not identifying a successor, but ensuring that the person who is the predecessor, the job that has been identified, the churn happens there so that the result of the good successor is seen. The readiness will be there, but we cannot move him unless the churn happens. So the organization should have a plan, not just to have good successors in the pipeline, but ensure that there is a churn as well. These are some of the challenges. There are many more to talk. We discuss here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dileep Chandra, for sharing your insights. Next, we shall move on to Ms. Ritu Chaubey. Ms. Ritu Chaubey has 24 years of experience as human resource professional. She has been the Director of Human Resource for Comsco, leading the India region for the past 8 years. She has rich experience in managing change, emerging out of mergers, acquisitions, spin-offs, and massive growth plans. Ms. Ritu has a diverse experience of working across IT research and development, sales, services, and manufacturing segments, along with great exposure working with companies like Nokia, Lenovo, Ericsson, APC, and leading integrations of Pace, Ruckus, Brocode with Alice or Comsco. She strongly believes that with right intent, patience, and perseverance, a lot can be achieved. So, Ms. Ritu, in the Indian private sector context, where attrition and job mobility is really high, does it make sense to do a succession planning or lateral hiring?
Great. Able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, never felt so important. This feels really good. So as I got this question and we were brainstorming, when this was sent to me, I was just thinking the succession planning is something I also studied, say, 25 years ago when I was passing out like you. But today when I look at this whole concept after spending that much time in the industry, the concept overall, in my opinion, has evolved. I don't think it is any more to do with a person-to-person identification and then you do a succession planning, right? It's more to do today, as I look at it, because as regards my background, it's more of acquisitions, mergers. Look at the market outside today. Such a disruptive market, right? Like how Dileep mentioned, there's so much of, the India context we talk about, or the US or the Europe context that Dileep touched upon. It's a global context today, in my opinion. My colleague and team member Shubha is here. I know that she has an aspiration to go to the US and maybe work there if there's an opportunity. But if we were to do succession planning, will she get that opportunity? Not really, right? Because what will happen if when you do succession planning? You are more focused to the region. You are more focused on the visibility that you have of the people that you know in your region. But that is not what the context is today. It's an open world, right? All of us have aspirations. We may work here, we may work wherever we want to do. So where has the concept then moved? It has moved from succession planning to something called leadership talent planning. Or if you also were to take off leadership, it is simply organization talent planning. Now what does that mean? It means the door is now open for a global audience to apply into roles anywhere in the globe. It does not limit you to a location, right? Two, because you're not limited to your location, then the whole regional element is gone. The company invests in you at a standard global level, right? There's no local India level. Then it beats the whole concept of only if you are IIM or whatever, then you're qualified. No. There's a common context built. Further, there are parameters to it. How do you qualify? I might identify her to be a successor. Is she interested? Does she want and she's not aligned to what I want her to be aligned today, though she is the best fit for my role maybe. So I think today the entire leadership talent planning, so by the way, succession planning, usually when we refer to succession planning, we don't refer this to in a technical context. We refer this more in a leadership context, right? Because technical skills are very different. Now you have different ladders, right? You have an individual contributors ladder, you have a managerial ladder, you have a program management, product management ladder. I come from IT world, so I'm using some of those terms. So succession planning as such could also be very specific when we talk about it. Usually we talk about it in a leadership framework, right? So what is this? Now other in the context of attrition and mobility that Priscilla mentioned. Now I think as HR professionals, if somebody here had to onboard my team, my first recommendation would be separate these things. Don't try and look at succession planning, leadership planning, attrition, mobility all in one context. Then we are confusing ourselves. In India, in Bangalore market, I'm sure Dileep would agree because he comes from talent acquisition, and talent acquisition has gone through a very tough cycle in the last 2 years, given the market condition we have been in. In the kind of situation that we are in India, and specifically in Bangalore, mobility is high. Everybody is hiring. Cisco, Juniper, HP, Comscope, Ericsson. Everybody wants to hire the right people at the right time at the right place, like you said, Father. But the point is, there's a war, right? So I would suggest that we separate these things. Attrition, mobility, all these will be there in the market. If we mix that, and we mix that with the leadership talent planning, then you're probably missing on the longer term strategy of your organization. So I would recommend we see these two topics in the two different contexts. Attrition, mobility is so much to do with your day-to-day firefighting and so much to do with your talent attraction, retention, etc. So you would everyday deal with it, everyday data, everyday figuring out. It's a war, and you will figure out how to be better as a company on your benefits, culture, environment, etc., to kind of appear cool for the Gen X today and still manage to get the right talent where you are adopted tracking, right? But the leadership talent planning is to do with your long-term strategy of the company. So if we were to mix the two things, sometimes I think, in my opinion, we are kind of confusing ourselves. Leadership talent planning will have to be done very differently, keeping the kind of, and long-term doesn't mean 10 years. If somebody asks me what it will be 10 years later, very tough to say that. In my last 8 years, I have been part of 4 or 5 different organizations. Rapid Wireless, Brocade, Pace, Alice, Comscope, Ervana. Believe me, all these organizations in the past 6 to 8 years. So if that is a rapid pace at which we are moving, and if I confuse myself with all these mobility and attrition aspects, then I'm actually confusing it with my long-term strategy. Though there is a disruption even in the organization, I will have to still keep my long-term strategy intact and make sure my succession planning has a proper framework which is more focused on my growth and culture, right? Competencies. So that's my initial thought on this. Maybe as we progress, we will talk more about what this means. But I just wanted to put this thought in your mind that don't mix it up. View this separately overall. I learned that over years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Du. That was insightful. Moving ahead, I'd like to introduce Mr. Mathew Joseph. Mr. Mathew Joseph has a total of 17 years of work experience, spanning across 3 pharmaceutical companies, 1 contract research organization, and 1 battery manufacturing company. He has been involved in HR business partnering for most of his career. He has a strong background in total loss and performance management. Mr. Mathew has worked with IQVIA, Base Batteries, Lundbeck Pharma, Stice Pharma, and now Biocon Biologics. As part of his team's deliverables in performance management, he has handled succession planning. He has worked on identifying critical positions and also on how we can create a steady pipeline for these roles. Also, in his recent stint with Biocon, he has committed to bringing more diversity in the leadership range. So, Mr. Mathew, what is the role of coaching and mentoring in succession planning, and what measures do you take to ensure that a leader trains those who are in the pipeline?
Thank you, and very very warm good afternoon to each and everyone. At the onset, I think it's very important for me to thank this institution because I passed out from the same. And it feels really, really nice to be back. This is the third time that I'm back in such a position where I'm trying to interact with the students. Feels really great. I can tell you the institution is designed for you to go out and grab your dreams. I'm a living example of the same. So that aside, coming back to the main topic, and that is with regard to succession planning. I see a lot of things written over there on the wall. Culture, training, union, skills, competency, payroll, target. Good, great. I mean, these are words that any HR professional should be thorough with. Now, the topic that we are talking about, succession planning, is something that we can't see in isolation. Okay? And as Ritu rightly told some time back, if you look at it in isolation, you're going to completely miss the bigger picture, and possibly the long-term strategy of your organization is going to get lost. Okay? Just a small question to each and every one of you. And let's talk about two brothers. Okay? Mukesh and Anil. Was there a problem with succession planning? These are not my friends, Mukesh Ambani and Anil Ambani. Sorry. Just in case it did not register. I don't think so. I think both of them were grouped pretty well, both of them coming from really strong business background. But then one is a success, the other one is a failure. I mean, maybe he's a success in his own right, but if you look at the larger picture of how business works, maybe he's not as successful as the other, right? So I'm trying to bring about here from a very non-tech background. I have been in pharma throughout. And what I see as succession planning today is very different from what I possibly learned when I was in your place. And let me give you some more insights into how it is done today. More than that, I would say if you are an HR, you're possibly an amalgamation of three different functions. Okay, today, when you hit a corporate organization, you're an amalgamation of IT, okay? Tech is very, very important. If you are someone who's allergic to tech, HR is going through a transformation where tech becomes a big lever to encash. Okay? The second is marketing, which means to say, how do you create a real brand value and a real whether it's the employee or the employer, whether you need to get talent, acquire talent, whether you need to retain it, at the end of the day, your branding does matter. So you become a marketing person. The last one is the HR, which takes care of the regular routine work also. Okay? Coming to the tech part and how it helps succession planning today is, most companies, what they are currently trying to do is to have a complete understanding of what the talent pool is like. To understand that, it's very important to understand how many roles you have in an organization. Okay? And as sometime back Ritu told, most of the organizations are doing away with this entire hierarchical way of working. Most of it is currently role-based. Okay? So for each and every role, you need to understand what are the critical roles that are there. Okay? And those critical roles can be leadership, may not be leadership also. But then those roles that we're talking about are bracketed as critical have to have some kind of a very logical mechanism to arrive at and say that yes, this is a critical role, this is not a critical role. Exactly the way Dileep told some time back, that there has to be a logical thing to it. In comes AI, machine learning. Okay? There's a role. There are skills and competencies required to do that role and do it successfully. Okay? When you look at those skills and what are the proficiency levels that you require, you arrive at and also also you amalgamate it along with what kind of business consequences you have. You come to know whether that particular role is critical or not. And that is where the whole succession planning starts. Okay? So in succession planning, there are many organizations that are now transforming to having an entire skill repository or catalog to say that if there is a person who needs to be at this particular level, then in that case, these skill parameters also have to be met and the skill proficiencies have to be met. So when, say, Mathew Joseph, Associate Director, HR in Biocon Biologics wants to become a CHRO, I can just go to a tool and tell this is what my aspirational goal is. A system will clearly tell me which are these areas that I need to work on in order for me to be there. And today, depending on what skills I possess, where do I stand? Okay? Next comes how I bridge that gap. And the system also tells very clearly that these are the skills that you need to develop. And that's where the entire learning and development piece comes. So learning and development today has shifted completely from a classroom training to any kind of matter that is available to enhance someone's knowledge. Right? And I'm sure most of you sitting over here today also refers to things like basic things like YouTube, right? To understand certain concepts. It's not, you are completely relying on an instructor to tell you what exactly does a certain concept mean, right? And those are the kind of learning interventions that keep coming. And that's how you keep building proficiency. So coming back to the whole logic of succession planning, today, succession planning is something that you need to look at in entirety after you have worked on what are these critical goals that you're looking at. And that is a major piece. Because it is not something, whether it's a bloodline, whether it's a lineage, whether it's anything to do, it's not something that is going to guarantee you 100% success in succession planning. What will really guarantee you some kind of assurance in this would be to have a very logical process to say that this is the right kind of person whom I can be looking at to become a successor. Also, touching upon one important factor, and again going back to as we spoke about the Indian context. Specifically in the Indian context, one thing that I do find, and maybe it's how we are wired, maybe it's a lacuna, whatever you say, okay? You will always find that there are certain managers who would be insecure about what happens if someone else gets into my position. Right? The openness that is required by a manager or a leader, so to say, is that if I don't move up and move out, there is no way someone else is going to come in here. That is the current logic. The logic needs to change, and we need to say, unless a person actually comes in and fills up this void, I am not going to move up. So it's both ways. Yeah. So that's how I look at succession planning and whatever work I have done in this particular field. Not very sure it's relevant, not relevant, whether you can relate to it or not. But trust me, if you go to things like, say a job architecture, we spoke about the organization design sometime back, right? Most of the organizations today are examining their organization design, a very, very crucial part, and trying to understand whether these many layers, these many skills, all these things is actually required or not. And how can we have more and more people upgrade and fill those positions? And succession planning today is happening at all levels. We're not just talking about leadership level, but it's happening at all levels. The context may be very leadership, but the fact of the matter is it's happening at all levels. And that's the right approach, because it has to have a rippling effect from bottom to the top. So that's what I have gathered so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mathew, for sharing your perspective. And now that we have heard individually from each of our delegates, we will open out 2 topics to the panel for the discussion. For a long time, diversity has been considered as in gender diversity. What are the other types of diversity you can think of as an Indian context? As a top managers in some of the most prominent companies in the country, do let us know how it can be implemented as well.
So for me, the diversity, apart from the gender diversity, right? So there are a lot of different diversities we look at. By default, as Father said, we have, in India context, we have people from different backgrounds that they come, right? Be it language, be it food habits, be it caste, religion, color, language, all of it. So that's a default diversity that we will have in any ecosystem in India. Right? And we, by default, do not realize that we have already adapted to this diverse culture, this diverse group that we have. But when it comes to a succession plan, and to have a diversity outside of the gender is very important. And I'm a classic example of what I'm going to talk about. In my first 15 years of experience in HP, I never did talent acquisition. I was in HR operations, I was in HR shared service, I was business HR, I was country general HR, was in compliance, but never did talent acquisition. So, coming to Mathew's point of identifying people who are aspiring for a certain role, and then looking at what are the gaps and filling it through learning program, if that had to happen, I would never get a talent acquisition role. Because my leaders, or whoever leader was there out there, would never identify me. Because I never did talent acquisition. Right? So, to add to that point, the organization should enable visibility, again, talking about transparency, to all those aspiring people to make themselves visible to the leaders. If I had not made myself visible to leaders in HR or talent acquisition space, it would have been very difficult for me to get into this role. Right? So coming to the diversity part of it, outside of gender diversity, you need to look at various functions. Do not have that stereotype of this person will be able to do the job if he has the background to it. Potential is very important. Your performance will take you to the point where you are, where you have reached. Okay, so am I audible? Okay, so your performance will take you to a certain level. For the next level, it is always the potential that you have. Right? And for the leaders to have visibility to all such people is very important. That transparency has to be created by the organization. The talents has to be seen across. Diversity cannot be just a gender specific. It has to be across various functions, various families, various capabilities, various skills. So coming to that point, for me, diversity can be various functions, various backgrounds, and I'm enjoying this role. And I never thought I'd enjoy this. Right? 2021, 2022 was crazy. And it gave me a kick which I never got in the last 15 years. Right? So it's all about the organization enabling an opportunity for diverse groups to come together and not just focus on a particular gender.
Thank you. So, yes, like to add anything?
No, I was just thinking that diversity and inclusion, I would talk about both, because diversity, like we said, we are born into. We know we are all diverse from, I don't know what ages. But the world has opened up to diversity in a big way, and I'm sure the world needs to also. But India need not wake up on diversity, is my personal opinion. We are there already. But in my opinion, inclusion is something we really need to wake up on. Especially, I would say, organizations become much more open to having our third gender included into our mainstream. With my talent acquisition team and with my leadership in the organization, something that I would like to brainstorm on this topic would be, how do we, one, change our processes, bring in that kind of awareness within the organization. For a child which is autistic, say, how do we, bring, people of that kind, people with disabilities, or what we call specially abled. Recently, I was watching something on the TV and I found somebody who was actually, he started off an organization who was, into getting the people with disability into mainstream. And he was very clear in saying, he was blind, and he was very clearly in saying, don't follow the and all of that. We know we do not have a particular ability. You can see I cannot. But that does not make me less talented. Right? There are other talents that I didn't support, which is a very good thought. I think organizations need to today wake up on inclusion. Right? So there's a need to change our policies, there's a need to change our processes, there's a need to bring our awareness higher. Coming to women, I don't know why for ages you confused diversity with gender diversity. Even today, I was reviewed 2 days ago with my talent acquisition lead, 25-75 ratio. 75 men, 25 women. Where are these women? At the bottom grade. Yeah. Typically that's the scenario. I'm sure my peers they would agree that that's typically the scenario. Now, do women want to be on top? They do want to be there. But then where is the whole system failing? Is it to look at the women's application? Do I want the quota? You want me to go in there? No, I don't want any quota. Or if I sit in a boardroom, I want to sit there because I'm eligible for it. I don't want to sit there because somebody brought me there out of a quota, right? That's not what I want to do. But is the organization being an equal employer, equal opportunity employer? Is the organization conscious about when I strive for it? Is there a culture or I would say openness in the leadership, which is today male dominated? Is there openness to try, give an opportunity? So how can we bring that cultural shift? I would say is a larger task that we as HRs have. Than trying to say I have 25% women, and tomorrow if I reach 50% women, that's everything, not really. Right? So data, like Mathew was mentioning today, I think data plays a very, very big role in HR. If you have your data and if you have digitized a lot of data, study through your data to the last minutest detail, there's a lot that the data throws out. And that will definitely enable a lot on diversity, inclusion, and all of that. So I think that's where my concern as an HR person would be.
Thank you, Mr. Tu. Yes, Mr. Mathew, would you like to go for the same as manufacturing and pharma?
Yeah, I will give a very contextual for specifically pharma. There's pharma manufacturing and then there is pharma sales also. Okay? While in manufacturing, in quality and R&D, I'm breaking it down really small so that you see where we have diversity and where we do not have diversity. Very precisely on the gender diversity part. I think the other forms of diversity are coming later, but then thinking very specifically about gender diversity. The overall diversity that we have in R&D is roughly about 0.47%, bordering to about 50%, which is great. Quality around 30%. But when I look at something like a sales, it's as low as 7%. The surprising part is, if you take a country like Africa or Singapore, okay, the kind of gender ratio that they have over there is about 25-75, and 75 is female, and that's in the sales part, the pharma sales part. Surprising, right? It's all about having it over here and having a mentality that we need to now give more exposure to women and ensure that they become women leaders also. Okay? The other day, one of my colleagues came up to me and said, why is it that you're not able to hire more women in the sales force? Give a very simple example. Okay? I have 10 people, 5 are males, 5 are females. I have a budget of 2 lakh rupees each. Okay? And I tell them, guys, here's 2 lakh rupees each. Go get yourself a bike. Okay? 90-95%, all the 5 guys will go and possibly pick up a Royal Enfield. 90-95% sure, the women will pick up Activa. Is there a written rule that women can't ride a Royal Enfield? There's not, because I can tell you I have 2 sisters who ride 350cc bikes. Okay? And yet, with that, that mentality, if you want to change things, there's an issue, because there is someone sitting at home who's taking a decision and saying, no, my girl child wouldn't go in for this. Okay? And that's where the game changer is. So, my piece on the fact that we need to have diversity, I think company which is mostly to do with sales, marketing, manufacturing, all these have to take up that entire DEI concept very, very seriously. Today, proud to tell you that Biocon has a separate department altogether to handle this. And there is a certain mechanism or review mechanism through which each and every of these departments are being pulled up and said, what are you actually doing about gender diversity in the world? Okay. The next thing, I'm talking about a very traditional pharma organization. The next big thing would be for us to have more and more diversity, whether it is PWD, that is people with disabilities, whether it is people with different races, sexual orientation, so on and so forth. Okay, because that's a huge subject altogether and requires and more shift, paradigm shift, I would say. And that is very clear and very visible on the ground, where there are sessions, there's a lot of reinforcement that has to be done to make it really visible that you need to now take away your unconscious or conscious bias away, and you need to focus on this one area. So that's how we are progressing.
Thank you, Mr. Mathew, for sharing the information. Now, moving on to the second discussion. How do we mitigate the biases in order to diversify the leadership bench for succession planning? What strategies can be developed to avoid such biases and ensure employee diversity in leadership positions? So, I would like to ask Mr. Winston, how does this scenario work in the startup firms?
You can hear me, right? It's pretty better.
I'll talk about my. Can you hear me? Or is this better? Which is better? Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. So I just stand so you can hear me. All right. I'll talk about my skill set. A startup that I built during the pandemic. Most of us worked from home during the pandemic. I never knew what it was to work from home. I worked in the field. I built one of India's first farm to home app. It's called Deep Rooted. What it does is it helped farmers bring their produce into homes. But let me tell you what we saw. When I joined this organization, we had one woman, just one. Her name is Nandita. She's still there. Today she's a manager. In the farm, we had about 400 people. Only 20-25 of them were women. So I'm going to first touch upon diversity, and then I'll talk about how we enable that at different levels. For me, first it's getting a conversation going. It was important to get a conversation going. I met with a lot of no's. We might believe we are progressive in forums such as these, where we actually have been exposed to the fact that we need diversity. We need to be inclusive. But sometimes in rural India, there's no choice. There's absolutely no choice. Like, women are only allowed to come to our warehouse between 9 in the morning and 6 in the evening. No, I think this is okay, right? So I think first, the most important thing, the way I look at diversity is, I've had business leaders tell me, no. There's this gentleman that I failed with miserably till date. He says women can't work in farms. Or he says women, it's very hard for them to impact farmers because farmers are very aggressive people. I thought farmers were pushovers because they commit suicide, right? But they are the most aggressive. So first you start, I began by trying to show business sense. So we were fruits and vegetables. You know, women treat fruits and vegetables very different than men. If you go to our warehouse, I still say it's my warehouse because I still believe I hold shares in that organization. The way women sort fruits and vegetables are much different than men. Sometimes men are disrespectful and they throw apples. I've literally seen that, right? So it was bringing business context, in getting leaders to believe we could actually first bring diversity. During the Navaratri phase of the Indian culture, that team of women are always portrayed as one of the best team. I still know most of their names. How did we now move to succession planning? So these were women who were very good at sorting, grading, knowing which is right, which is unright. But most of them inherently did not want to maybe take leadership because they came from environments where in the farm, for some reason, if there's a problem and if there's a gentleman and a lady in the farm, everyone looks to the man very often. Looks like only he has the answer, right? So most of the women in that team were not ready, or they were hesitant to come forward. They felt they did not have what it takes to communicate to other people to get them to do their job well. And more importantly, you know, a supervisor or a manager in the warehouse, he needs to be available more often. So he needs to cover the evening shift where most of the work gets done. How do women do that, right? We never succeeded at that, but we got a conversation going. We spoke to the women. We showed them what it meant to move up the ladder, empowering them, but also giving back more to the company. So whenever I look at diversity first, I look at conversations. I know most of us are privileged. We come from that area. Most corporates, I look up to most of the corporates here on the stage. They've been there, they've done that, they've educated. That's why they are at stages which are actually inclusive. Some startups still struggle from that. There's bias. There's a founder who only wants to hire his friend, right? There's a founder who says, hey Vinny, there's no way this person can work night shifts because she's got a kid to look after. There are biases. There are biases. We have to have conversations. The way I look at bringing women into different roles in the organization is not by forcing upon it. I very often, in my early stages in HR, I thought women wanted that quota system. I was completely wrong. I have a 17-year-old daughter. She tells me I don't want someone telling me I got this because I'm a woman or a girl. They have the merit. So I like to build processes which bring diversity of talent pool to the process. I like to bring diversity of talent pool to make a business impact. And in my heart, I hope that the right candidate shows up. Now, if we are in a deadlock situation where there are two candidates, right? Sometimes I've noticed the gender or the diversity that we might not have looked at, sometimes that trumps the status quo because there's something else unique there. If we can do that as HR professionals, we are fair and we are giving people pride when they move up the ladder. Really proud of the fact that when I left Clover, we were at least 30% women. We had women across the organization. There was no lady at a founder level, but we had a head of product. We had a head of marketing. Now there's a head of HR who's a lady, right? So there are different firms. At Silk, we have a director who works out of Canada who is a woman, right? I don't force it. I learned the hard way. I learned that women or the different diversity groups, they don't want to be told that it's a free pass. Some of us in HR make that mistake. We champion that percentage, we champion 70, 70-30. Why can't it be 60-40? That's not the fact. The fact is championing people who will make a difference and will take pride when they get that. I made that mistake actually. When you said it, it meant a lot. So all of y'all as young HR professionals, look beyond the concept. Diversity in its original phase was trying to say give everyone a chance. Today, diversity and inclusion, I think the second word is more powerful. How can we be inclusive? How can we respect, bring? But more importantly, how will business sustain, because those decisions are important.
So how many of you think that a person with disability can do a leadership job? All of you think, right? The transgender? How many of you think that this kind of people are currently available in our corporates to do the leadership job? Nobody thinks, right? So, isn't that a bias? We need to break this, right? So to reach there, we need to start now. We are late. And hence, in HP, so far in the last 3 years, we have hired around 100 people with disability, around 18 transgenders, and there are now in the span of 3 years, we hardly have attrition. Attrition is because we have told them to go, because they are not able to perform. That's because of the feasibility issues. There are problems with people with disability as well, and transgender as well. They cannot perform on this. Not everybody is like 100% great performance. But whoever has stayed back, they know 150% more than the normal guys. That's the fact. This perception has to change. We need to take this message to the leaders. Go to them and tell that this group of people will deliver more than the other guys, provided they get that opportunity. And we need to create that opportunity. And it is not possible to do overnight. You don't have food. Right now, I'm looking for a person who is good in hiring, good in training, managing a hiring team and a training team, and understands tech support business. And I have convinced my leader, telling him that we take a transgender. The position is open for 4 months and we are struggling. We are not getting. We are open to accommodate, but we are not getting. And then the head is almost given up on me, saying that you're not getting me the people. Right? So I had to put a lot of effort to convince him, but then the situation is very different right now. The bias will grip him, and we tell that, okay, they're not there in the market. So as future leaders, future HR leaders, I want all of you to focus on breaking this bias, and that's possible at a very ground level at this point in time. With gender diversity is accepted. Now everybody is behind gender diversity. Everybody wants 50-50%, and there is a lot of focus there. But then if you're talking about other diversity, so-called inclusion, wanting to accommodate everyone, you need to change that mindset and create that ecosystem in the organization for people to be ready to accept any kind of genders, any kind of people, right? And it's easy to build from the scratch, from the grass level, because you have talent available in abundance at the moment. And over a period of time, that perception will change. And people will accept and know that, okay, there is a pool available, they are experienced ones, they are proving themselves, and hence we build a bench with experience and we hire them, and the group will be very diverse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dileep. So moving on, now we will open the discussion for the students. Okay. So you are most welcome to ask the questions related to the topic to this round table, which is developing the Agile Succession Planning processes and diversifying the leadership bench. Please introduce yourself and indicate whether you want to ask specific corporate delegate to answer or whether you are asking the question to all the delegates at the round table.
Hello delegates, I'm Ritu Chaubey. I'm from first year. So my question is to the entire table. Does diversifying in succession planning enhance custom employee retention? Yes or no? And then how? That's my question.
Repeat the question, please. That's what you meant.
Okay. Does diversifying in succession planning help or enhance employee retention?
I was trying to understand, but I can still take that. So I wish we could diversify and still make employee retention happen because challenges of retention are very different as such. And so this connects to this whole thing about biases and all of that we just discussed. I wish we are able to bring in diversity, inclusion, and yet we are able to make sure culturally we are able to retain talent. But one way where it helps is the employees do realize that the organization does have an intent. And if we articulate that intent of diversifying or going on the direction of inclusion, if as an organization we become more conscious, and not just conscious, but we are able to articulate that into intent and further break down that intent into actions. So for example, like Mathew was talking about different roles. Now on those different roles, can I actually call this out clearly saying, on these different roles as an organization, I do want to go and look at a diverse candidate or an inclusion candidate. Then gradually my organization starts realizing that they are working in a responsible setup or a culture or organization, and that somewhere fosters retention in a way. So I do see some connection, but maybe my other peers will just kind of further answer.
Well, I'd say there is no scientific way of proving it, and I don't think we've done too much of work in terms of Indian context, trying to see relationship or correlations between diversification of different leadership roles and retention. That was what your question was, right? But I can also tell you that exactly, sometime back we had spoken about, or rather I had spoken about the employer and employee branding, right? It at least gives a sense to the employees that this is a good organization to work with because it is inclusive in nature, exactly what we are told now. And that branding might help in better retention because people would want to work with a certain purpose in mind, right? Because if I take my organization's purpose, it is to ensure that there is affordable biosimilars that reach people at an affordable cost, right? So when you have a very clear goal in mind, people want to get attached to you. And maybe that will help you in retention, but there is no clear formula required.
Thank you so much.
Any other question?
So first of all, good afternoon to everyone, and I'm personally really glad to be here because I'm planning to specialize in HR in my second year. I'm Nishan. And my question is, succession planning process is an integrated program across the organization. So how will it be affected if any other HR process gets affected or deviates from its objectives?
Yeah, I guess Mr. Dileep will be the right person exactly to answer this.
You'll have to repeat the question, I think, in the second half.
So my question is, how will succession planning process be affected if all the HR processes going on in an organization deviate from its objectives, like they also get affected in a negative manner? What will happen to succession planning then?
No, I don't think succession planning will have connection to other HR processes at first place. Let's not look at it in totality. So if other HR processes delay, let's keep the other HR process separate for now, okay? Let's talk about succession planning as a process, right? What is succession planning? You have identified a lot of people to take on a particular role in the organization, and you are working on filling the gaps they may have, right? And you have told them that they are identified as to be a successor. It can be one person. To answer the first question, it can be a diverse group of people as well. That might help retain that diverse group of people because they are looking forward to get that futuristic role for them. And they're going through a training program. Now, what happens in a recruitment process? If it delays, successors are still being identified. Now, only challenge I can think of a derailment and a problem that might get created is the recruitment team not talking to the HR team to know who are the successors identified so that there is a role that comes up. They are not talking to these guys, right? So there is a possibility to answer your question, but very remote that if other HR processes fail, successors will not get an option to move ahead in the role. That's very remote. That's all in isolation. Succession planning is actually an output to the talent acquisition team to take it forward to the next level, get them a role, right? So a failure in succession planning to give that output might create a problem for the talent acquisition team. But the other way is very rare. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Dileep. So, I just asked if any faculties have any questions. Okay.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this year's Roundtable Conference, and what an insightful session it has been. This roundtable could not occur without the kind cooperation of our 4 delegates who have put aside their busy schedules for no other reason than to be with us today. As a token of our deep gratitude, may we present to you, dear delegates, a token of gratitude as memento. We hope your experience here has been comfortable and that you enjoyed the session as much as all of us here at SJIM have. Do come to our campus whenever you can, and now you're part of the Joseph's family. I now invite our Associate Dean, Professor Vijay Lawrence, to please commemorate our delegates by distributing the mementos. Mr. Winston A de Rosario, Director, Global Head of People and Culture at SJIM. Mr. Dileep Chandra, Talent Acquisition Head at HP India. Ms. Ritu Chaubey, Human Resource Director at Comscope. Mr. Mathew Joseph, Associate Director, Human Resources at Biocon Biologics. we come to the end of the HR Conclave 2023, I request Ms. Megha Kansagra, Chairperson of the HR Club, to propose the vote of thanks.
Dear delegates from the corporate sector, Mr. Winston A de Rosario, Ms. Ritu Chaubey, Mr. Mathew Joseph, Mr. Dileep Chandra, our Director, Dean, faculty members, ladies and gentlemen, I feel privileged to extend vote of thanks to all those who have contributed to make this year's roundtable a success. On behalf of the entire SJIM family, I would like to convey our deep regards to all the delegates present here for gracing the event. Thank you for lending us your precious time, for visiting us and providing the real-time information on Agile Succession Planning and diversifying the leadership bench. I am sure everyone here will take back valuable lessons. I must mention my deepest sense of appreciation to our Director, Reverend Dr. Manoj D'Souza SJ, our Dean Dr. A.R. Rajgopalan, and our Associate Dean, Professor V.J. Lawrence, for their constant support, without whom this event would never have taken place. An event like this cannot happen overnight. The wheels started rolling weeks ago. It requires planning and an eye for the details. For this, I extend my deepest gratitude to Dr. Karen Rodriguez for her meticulous vision and guidance that steered the organization for this event in the right direction, and her untiring efforts, patience, input, and ever giving an ear to our ideas which wanted to be incorporated. My heartfelt gratitude to my core team, Priscilla Boniface, Navya Shri, Priyal, and Swada. No words can describe the help and support that you have given me, not just for the conclave, but for every other activities. I couldn't have done it without you. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the media team and the hospitality team for the constant support throughout the event. I would also like to thank Alka and team for making this stage light up with our theme. A big thank you to all the volunteers for their unrelenting dedication making this conclave a success. I cannot thank you enough for your enormous cooperation. Special thanks to Mr. Rego, Mr. Philip and Muthu Anna for their all help in managing the infrastructure for this event. And this is your HR coordinator signing off. Thank you one and all.
I request the delegates on the dais and in the auditorium, the faculty members and the organization team to join for tea arranged in the Xavier's Hall in the ground floor. For the rest of the audience, the refreshments are available right outside the auditorium after the event.